this just happened a few hours ago. I have called and reported it to the police and am home safely, but I guess I'm still in shock. Could do putting it down in writing to process it, and figured this is as good a place as any to share what had happened. I finished work early today, so decided to go for a run. I set out around 4:30 and decided my usual routes, which cross many country roads, will not be very practical, and so I took an alternate route along a canal towpath and some pathways through the woods that I knew would be less busy. Everything was going well. I was pushing myself steady until I got to a path on the way back around 6 kilometers into the route. It is a long, straight path with a canal on the left side, and on the right there's wasteland where some factories used to be, but have mostly been demolished. It has been abandoned for as long as I can remember and is overgrown with trees and weeds, but there are odd bits of old factory that for some reason weren't fully demolished. As I got level with one part of the factory, which still had some old metal fire escape steps attached to it, I noticed a rough-looking guy sat on the wall with his legs hanging down. He jumped to his feet as soon as he saw me coming and shouted something, but I couldn't make it out. As I came level to where he was, I heard him say, "Wait there! Can you help me find my phone?" He said while he was running down the steps, and so I stopped as I got level with the bottom of the steps, meaning we were standing just a few feet apart but with a fence in between us. It was a really old iron fence with vertical metal bars that have spikes at the top, like you sometimes see around churches and things. He asked me if I would help him find his phone again, saying he had dropped it somewhere nearby, and asked me if I could ring his number so he could listen for it. I felt I couldn't exactly refuse as my phone was strapped to my arm, so I said he could tell me the number, and I took my phone off my arm and unlocked it. He blurted out a phone number, but said it far too fast, and it didn't begin with a 07, which made me start to feel like something wasn't right. Although I was beginning to suspect at this point, I wasn't really worried. I'm in pretty good shape, had a big size and weight advantage over him, plus there was a fence between us. He didn't seem in very good physical shape and seemed like he might be homeless. I figured if he was trying to mug me for my phone, his only chance would be to pull a knife, so I made sure to stay a good distance away from the fence and kept an eye on where his hands were. So I told him I didn't catch any of the numbers because he was going too quickly, and he came out with another number this time, and this time it did have a 07 at the beginning. I entered 7 numbers, and then he started to look around and said, "I can hear it. Come and help me look for it," as he was looking around at the ground. I was about to say that I hadn't even finished dialing when a much larger black guy appeared from behind a section of the wall to my right. He was also really scruffy looking, and from the look in his eyes it seemed like he was on drugs. He came out saying he could hear the phone ringing over towards him and beckoned me to come through a gap in the fence and help look. The white guy then said, "Is it ringing, yeah?" And I told him that it was, even though I still hadn't dialed the last digits, and now I was sure they were trying to lure me to come over to that side of the fence. After 2 or 3 times of them both beckoning me to come and help, always insisting they could hear the ringing, I heard the black guy say, "He's not gonna fall for it." He said it in a hushed way as if he thought I wouldn't hear, but with being in the middle of nowhere, I could clearly understand what he said. The white guy started acting quite aggressive and punched a tree, telling me he needed his phone badly and his whole life was on the phone, telling me to come and help them look for it. While he was punching the tree and ranting, the black guy had taken a few steps away to the right, meaning I couldn't keep my eyes on both at the same time. It was after 5 p.m. by this point, and it had gotten dark all of a sudden, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. I noticed there was a gap in the fence where some of the bars had been removed right where the black guy was heading, and I decided at that point to get the hell out of there and made a run for it. Neither of them said anything as I ran away, which made me sure they had malicious intentions. If they had genuinely lost their phone and needed some help, I would have expected them to shout, "Where are you going?" or something to try to get me to come back, but they didn't shout anything. After sprinting a good 20 to 30 seconds, I turned to see if they were chasing me. They were both standing on the path around where the gap in the fence had been cut, but not chasing me. They were just standing there watching me run away. I continued running away, but kept looking back every few seconds until I was out of sight. It was at this point I got off the canal path and onto the roads. The person I spoke to on the phone to report it took my details and description, but seemed like it wasn't anything worth worrying about, but said it would be investigated. The whole incident has left me a bit unnerved, and I'm pretty sure I won't be jogging that route alone anytime soon. This happened earlier this week, and it still freaks me out. I work at a hotel in town and was driving my husband's truck into work as he was taking mine to the shop to get serviced. He has a very large truck, and I only drive it when I absolutely have to. When I pulled into the side parking lot, I noticed the entire lot is covered in snow and no one can see the lines for the spots, so I begin to look like a moron and try to park in what I hope was a spot, backing up and moving forward several times. When I finally park, I get out of the truck and grab my backpack when I hear someone yelling from the sidewalk from behind the parking lot. "Hey, you need to learn how to fucking park." I'm embarrassed, but just close the truck, lock it, and begin walking to the front of the building. The hotel has a side entrance for employees, but it takes a code and I have a shitty memory, so I just walk to the front and go through the main entrance. I hear the guy yelling again. "Did you hear me, bitch?" I walk faster and take a peek behind me. The guy is following me. I keep walking but call back, "Please leave me alone, I need to go to work." Before I can reach the corner of the building and make my way to the entrance, the guy grabs my arm and spins me around. I will never forget what that guy looked like for as long as I live. He wore dark clothes with a torn-up winter coat. His eyes were bloodshot and he smelled like a combination of cigarettes and whiskey. I guessed he may have been drunk, but he didn't slur at all when speaking. "You're coming with me." The guy began dragging me back to the truck and I tried to pull my arm away from him. "Let go of me." "Give me the keys. We're taking a drive." I begin to yell for help as his grip on my arm gets tighter. I'm a 26-year-old woman, not skinny but not a lot smaller than this guy. He was dragging me easily and the snow on the ground just made my feet slide along on the ground. "Someone help! Please!" No one was near us and I keep fighting to get away from this guy. I prayed there would be guests that could possibly hear me, but it was our slow season, so most likely there was no one in the rooms on that side of the building. The guy turns back to glare at me. "Shut the fuck up and give me the keys." Now, I was carrying my backpack on one shoulder as it was big and bulky from my uniform and shoes. I quickly slipped the strap down my arm, grabbed it, and swung it right into his face. The guy let me go and I just ran for my life to the front doors. I heard the guy screaming but ignored him. I was too scared to look back at him. I ran inside all the way to the employee locker rooms. When I finally calmed down enough, I went to the front desk to talk to security. Sadly, there were no cameras on that side of the building, so nothing was recorded. They called the cops and I made a report. The cops informed the general manager of the hotel that they seriously needed to consider security cameras on that side of the building, as drunks and druggies were known to be in this area. There was a bar just a couple streets down. They got the description of the guy and said they would keep an eye out for him. The manager apologized like crazy about the incident, but I told him it wasn't his fault. He's a really good guy. I did ask for the security guard to follow me out so I could check on the truck. Thankfully, it was fine. The security guard promised to make more rounds outside, especially that early in the morning. I live in a middle-low-class neighborhood in the Caribbean. It's a quiet place where nothing happens. The type of place where people go and retire to sip pina coladas all day. However, a few houses next to mine lived a family that were not like the rest. They had the biggest house on the street and lived luxuriously. Their kids would play with me, especially the smallest girl we all nicknamed Tiny. Tiny was about 5 when I was 11, and she was always at my house. I knew my mom and the neighbors were concerned about a 5-year-old being all day outside, not arriving at her house until midnight on school days. But it was a quiet place where nothing happened, so no one got worried. When Tiny turned 6, her parents threw a giant birthday party for her and all the neighborhood kids were invited. I wanted to go. They had bouncy houses, water slides, and everything a kid would want to play with, but my parents didn't allow me to go. I never knew why. I supposed it was because my mom didn't know her mom. I remember feeling very sad because everyone was there and I was playing alone at my house. After the birthday, things went back to normal, and one day we were all playing and talking about what our parents did for work. We asked Tiny and her siblings, but none of them knew what they did exactly, except that he traveled a lot to his meetings. I didn't pay much attention and we continued on with our day. One night we were playing on the street when we started hearing loud pops coming from Tiny's house. I will never forget that day. The neighbors, including my mom, came out rushing us inside yelling it was gunshots. Some of us got in my house and we stayed there as my next-door neighbor, who was a cop, ran towards Tiny's house. All we saw after the gunshots was a black van rushing down the street and almost killing a dog. Some men entered the house. Tiny and her siblings wanted to check what was going on, but everyone forbade them to go. All I remember was a bunch of cops and ambulances a few minutes later, and in a day I never saw Tiny or her siblings again. For a couple of months the house sat empty, but black vans and strange men kept coming into the neighborhood door to door asking for any information about the man and his children. No one in the neighborhood spoke about it. I know the cops asked me about Tiny and the kids and if they ever said anything weird about their dad or mom, but I was only 11 and more concerned about playing Mario Kart Wii than what was happening that night. Years passed and the story faded away. Now that I'm grown, I asked my neighbor, the cop, what went down that night, as there were rumors the guy died. He said that night the man got a gun emptied into his skull and his wife was gravely wounded. She survived, because he was a drug lord who was making deals with the police to turn in rival gangs and some other people to the cops. The men in the van that were going door to door wanted to know where his kids and wife were to also shut them up. As to the kids, his oldest son was found dead a few hours away in a neighboring town, his car set ablaze. His other children are now living in other countries under witness protection programs. I just hope wherever Tiny is, she's doing okay and her family got the help they needed. Also, a quick edit. I found the link of the news and asked my neighbor about it to give me more details on it. The wife was shot in the leg, which resulted in massive blood loss, but she was overall fine. This happened a few years ago when I was still living with my mom and I had borrowed her car to go see my then boyfriend for the evening. It was around midnight when I got back to my neighborhood, so the roads were empty. And that's when I noticed this dirty, run-down, rusted white utility van that a maintenance guy would drive following me. I never saw the driver's face, but I got this immediate sinking feeling in my stomach because something felt wrong about this van. I was only 20 at the time, but I knew better than just to drive straight to my house and let this person know exactly where I live, no matter how desperately I wanted to go home and ignore it. But I also wasn't 100% sure that they were actually following me yet. I didn't want to jump to conclusions just because it was late and I was alone and being paranoid, so I drove to a shopping complex a few minutes away that was well lit and had a public library to see if I was being followed. I thought I lost the van, but decided to wait in the parking lot for a few minutes because I had a bad feeling I just couldn't shake. Sure enough, the van showed up and was driving in random circles around the parking lot looking for me. This scared me quite a bit, so I drove towards the big mall that's always got security or police presence because it was the midway point between where I was and where I lived. I parked in a pretty well-lit, although empty, 24-hour McDonald's parking lot where I had a great view of the roads and the mall, but I wasn't super easy to spot, and waited to see if the van would show up looking for me. It did. And of course, this would be the one time security and the cops were nowhere to be found, which was half the reason I decided to head there in the first place. Realizing whoever was driving this van 100% was actively following me in the middle of the night, I knew just driving home was not an option, and that's a terrifying realization. Luckily, the police station is just a few minutes away from where I was, so I try and discreetly drive away, hoping the van hasn't noticed me yet. I wasn't lucky because it wasn't long before the van was back in my rear view mirror. At this point, I'm panicking pretty hard and my anxiety is high. I finally pulled into the police station parking lot, and seconds later the van came to a stop in the middle of the road for no more than a few seconds. I'm guessing just long enough for them to realize where I led them, and they took off immediately. And so fast. I did make it home safe and without seeing the van again not long after, but this whole ordeal took at least an hour of my night. It was after 1 a.m. by the time I made it home, and I was terrified the whole time. I don't know what this guy's specific intention was, but honestly, I don't need to know. I know it was nothing good, and I likely avoided a very bad situation. If you think someone is following you, it's not stupid or paranoid to make sure you aren't right. Who knows what might have happened if I had just led him to my house or gotten out of the car. I've come a long way from the life I used to live. About 6 years ago, I was a homeless drug addict. You know the epidemic. I was trying to find somewhere safe to sleep. I foolishly cut down an alley. Birmingham, Alabama is known for violent crime, and as I was walking, I saw a silhouette of a man not too uncommon, as there are many homeless people from Birmingham. But something felt off. Something felt sinister. Before I could even set my bag down behind a dumpster, he was already feet from me. He began screaming, "I know what you did, you piece of shit." I have never met this dude in my life. Before I could even say anything, I felt a sharp pain in my left cheek. He had stabbed me through the cheek with a 3-inch knife. He stabbed me again, and I tried to dodge it, but he gashed me under my right eye. I began to fight back and managed to get the upper hand on him, as he was much smaller than me. I hit him 3 good times in the face. I felt his jaw break, and at that point he took off running. I was bleeding profusely and could put my tongue through my cheek. It took 22 stitches to sew up the hole in my face, and 8 stitches for the gash under my eye. At the hospital, I filed a police report, and to this day nothing's come of it. I'm back on my feet now, but I still live in Birmingham, and to this day I still get nervous when people walk behind me. I hope and pray I never see that guy again. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. Describes my childhood and fits in well here, so I decided to share. It was 2009. I'm in high school and I'm a male. English is not my first language, so feel free to give me a writing lesson. I live on an island where most people live near the coast, but my childhood house is deep in the mountains. Imagine a house in the woods, but at the very top of a mountain. The house is surrounded by thick mist every night, like in a bad horror movie, and the woods around it start less than 2 feet from the outer walls of the house. Our closest neighbor is a 15-minute drive, and 5 minutes away there's an abandoned house. I think the house belonged to a distant relative, but was abandoned more than 40 years ago. There's no street lights, and there's all kinds of animals roaming the area. This is important to the story because even though you couldn't see a group of 10 people hiding 1 meter away from you in the woods, you could hear absolutely everything up to a couple kilometers away. If we saw car lights or heard a car approaching, me and my family would turn off the lights and hide. Don't know why. Shy, antisocial, you name it. I think that's enough setup to the story, but I'll add some details that might be important. My house is small and impoverished, but our family car was a good one. I don't know much about cars, but my dad always says without a really good car we wouldn't be able to make it up and down the mountains where we lived. Also, there's currently 8 people inside our house at around 11 p.m. So I'm at the dining room table enjoying some cereal while I'm watching anime and having the time of my life. The lights in the house were on, so nothing could be seen in the dark outside. There's a window in front of me that gives to the front of the entrance of the house and the only road. Something calls my attention, but I neither hear nor see anything. I think I see a human silhouette outside, but it doesn't move, so I just ignore it as some effect of the lights in the house and my own reflection. More anime and more cereal. I feel something moving on the other side of the window, and this time the silhouette is waving at me. I felt my heart jump out of my chest and I froze. The person outside waves at me as if trying to not let anybody else in the house notice him. After maybe 10 seconds in which I'm looking at him with a spoon halfway to my mouth, he decides to say, "Hello, I need help." My parents hear him and approach the window, which made me sure I wasn't looking at a ghost. Amazing news. The man outside starts telling a story about how he had his car stolen at gunpoint and he needs help. My parents are surprised that nobody heard footsteps or a car or anything, so they whisper their theories amongst themselves. For the mysterious guy's story to be true, he had to have been mugged more than a mile away, got his car stolen, and then walked for a half an hour in the dark through the woods following the dim lights of our house. My parents still decided to believe him and they offered to call the police. The visitor begs to say the stupidest thing he could have. "Don't call the police. I don't have a gun." My parents stay silent for a while. The guy outside knows he messed up but proceeds to make his request. "Can I get a ride downtown?" My dad nervously chuckles and gives him an excuse. He mentions the time, the fact that the guy was lying and he had already called the police. A lie. This is when my favorite part of the story begins. I stand up from the table shaking. I go to the closet, and even though I can't see this guy's face, I know he's following my actions. I get 2 machetes that are half my size and run to another room. I was terrified, and looking back, I probably took away the only weapons my parents could have used to protect themselves in case of an altercation. I opened the door to the room where me and my siblings sleep, and they were watching some silly show. Probably something stupid like Hannah Montana or iCarly. And their hyena laughter came out. My sisters are loud and my younger brothers are 4 years old, 7 years old, and 9 years old. So their laughs are angelic by day and demonic by night. I signal at them to shut up and they do so, joining me and my parents in our fear. We listen in silence as the guy says, "It's okay if you can't help me. I'll go to the next house." My dad says, "There is no next house. You should just wait for the police here." The stranger says, "I don't need the police, I'm good." This goes back and forth. The guy is now in good shape to walk an hour down the mountain to reach downtown. My dad offers a rusty metal tricycle from our porch so that he can go downtown as a joke. The guy accepts his offer and grabs the tricycle. I assumed he just wanted to leave with something. This tricycle is 20 years old and it definitely doesn't work. We hear the screeching of the tricycle for a couple seconds as the stranger struggles to be able to ride it and then stop not too far away from the house. It seemed like he stopped and we didn't hear any footsteps that indicated the guy had left. After trying to identify if he was still in sight to no avail, my dad calls the police. We wait in silence looking at the road from the front windows. 15 minutes later, the police get there. And as soon as the red and blue lights show up, they illuminate the entire road up to the abandoned house. The tricycle is still in the road not too far away. The police claim not seeing anybody on the road. There's only one road in the mountain, and if the guy kept walking, they would have seen him. So they just took a look at the woods with a flashlight and called it a day. The cops were clearly freaked out by the eerie look of our house and did not stay more than 5 minutes. Nothing else happened that night. I slept with 2 machetes under my pillow, which I remember angered one of my sisters. We have no idea who the person was. No carjackings were reported the next day, and even though a lot of weird things happen around my house, we never saw this guy again. It's pretty obvious he was trying to steal our family's car. But there were a few things we could never understand. Where the hell did he come from? Where the hell did he go? If his story was true, he had the worst luck in the world. I think the situation was interesting because I think about it from his point of view and our horror night turns a bit comical. I mean, imagine this. You go to rob a house. Turns out the people inside speak calmly. I don't know how many criminals encounter this as they try to intimidate or deceive. There's a scrawny, seemingly mute kid that tries to be sneaky and grabbing some machetes and then hides in darkness in the house. And there's child laughter coming from the non-visible rooms of the house. You could see the doors, but seeing inside the rooms would be impossible looking through the windows. I think we were lucky to out-creep the creep that night. I don't see any other reason for the guy to back out of his plans. The guy clearly had a gun and bad intentions, not to mention his ability to ninja walk through a forest where we could hear wild cats walking around. Also, no neighbors to witness or hear anything. I hope to never meet him, even though I wouldn't know since I didn't see his face. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you would like to help support the channel, I would highly recommend becoming a patron, or even a channel member. You can find a link in the description. I appreciate y'all checking out this video, and I hope you are all getting ready for Thanksgiving. Well, those of you that celebrate, I know not everyone's in the United States, but I'm ready to smoke a turkey. Some people smoke cigarettes, some smoke weed, I smoke turkeys. And the other stuff too, but I smoke turkeys, alright? Yeah. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do a nice long stream on Thanksgiving while I'm smoking my turkey because it takes me like 12 hours and I'm just standing outside bored as shit anyway, so. If you're bored Thanksgiving and you want to chill with me, that'd be cool. If not, oh well. It's probably gonna be at like 3 or 4 in the morning because it takes a very long time to smoke a turkey. Yeah. Once again, I really do appreciate you checking out this video, and if you would like to help support what I do, make sure to become a patron or a channel member. And I will catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.